Rasping screams pierced the derelict Ventaxian ship as the captive alien girl strained against her restraints, abandoned by her cruel Ventaxian masters to die alone in the dark. But fate had other plans when human marine Marcus Stevens stumbled upon her prison. He had to free her, or the coming Ventaxian attack would make them both just more casualties in the brutal conflict consuming the sector. Marcus gripped his plasma cutter tightly as he cautiously moved through the battle-damaged alien corridors, emergency lights flickering ominously. Stepping over fallen debris and sparking wreckage, he followed the distress signal to a dimly lit cargo hold. There he found her, a young Ventaxian female beaten and chained to the wall, slender with grey skin and glowing purple eyes wide with terror. She flinched back as he approached, shouting in an unknown alien tongue. "It's okay, I'm here to help," Marcus said, raising his hands and using his suit's translator to convey his intent. She stared at him warily, but seemed to understand. Trust would have to come later. They needed to move fast. He set to work on her bonds with his cutter as the deck shook under his feet. Explosions in the distance. Glancing at a flickering monitor, Marcus saw Ventaxian and human fleets clashing in a storm of missiles and flaring beam weapons just clicks away. Caught in the middle of the battle, they had to escape before they were vaporized along with the derelict. Purple blood oozed from the alien's wounds as the chains finally fell away. She collapsed forward into Marcus's arms, and he half-carried, half-dragged her back to his waiting ship, the Hyperion. Sealing the airlock, he brought her to the medbay, laying her on a cot and bandaging her injuries as best he could. She flinched at his touch, pupils narrowing to slits, but allowed him to work. Sliding into the pilot seat, Marcus gunned the thrusters, blasting away from the raging battle, but his sensors flared with contacts, Ventaxian attack ships closing fast on intercept vectors, lasers hammering his shields. Surprisingly, the alien female was suddenly beside him, frantically gesturing at the controls, a fierce determination in her glowing eyes. She clearly wanted to help fly. Against his instincts, Marcus shifted aside to the co-pilot station. She instantly began working the unfamiliar human controls. Together, the unlikely allies poured power to engines and weaved through sizzling energy beams, racing to escape, racing to survive. Two disparate beings, fates now inescapably entwined, fighting to live another day in an uncaring universe. The Hyperion shook and rattled as sizzling laser blasts streaked by, lighting up the cockpit in strobing flashes. Marcus felt his hands clamping the flight controls in a death grip as sweat dampened his forehead. His teeth clenched as he wrenched the ship into a sharp banking turn. The inertial dampeners strained to compensate. Sirius leaned in, her nose nearly touching the screen as she studied the chaotic jumble of space rocks. She gave a single, determined nod. Her slender grey fingers flew nimbly over the co-pilot controls as she route power from weapons to engines and shields. Together, human and Ventaxian guided the Hyperion into a stomach-churning plunge directly into the treacherous asteroid field. The ship instantly began shuddering as small chunks of rock pinged off the shields like hammering fists. Marcus wove the vessel through the deadly obstacles, narrowly whipping past jagged stone spears the size of buildings. Behind them, the bulkier Ventaxian attack craft barreled after them, filling the black void with searing beams of proton fire. But the enemy's superior firepower meant little in the tight, twisting confines of the asteroid labyrinth. One fighter smashed into a planet-sized boulder, detonating in a plume of vaporized metal. Two more fell victim to a cascade of tumbling rocks, pulverized to atoms. But one tenacious Ventaxian pilot stuck to them, matching Marcus's every corkscrew turn and gut-wrenching maneuver. The enemy was slowly reeling them in, lining up for a killing shot. "Damn it, this guy's good," Marcus growled. Suddenly he snapped his fingers. "Sirius, take over." Without hesitation, she seized the controls as he vaulted from his chair, racing back to the hold. Tether, where was that damn gravity tether? There. He snatched the tool, originally meant for towing helpless ships. Bracing against the hull, he leaned out the open hatch, sighting down the spinning tow cable, searching for a target. The Ventaxian attack ship roared past, so close he could feel the heat. Now, Marcus fired the tether. The magnetic clamp hit home, latching onto a huge chunky asteroid. The cable snapped taut and the Hyperion abruptly wrenched hard to one side, whipping them around the rock in a slingshot turn at breakneck speed. Totally blindsided, the fighter couldn't compensate in time. It plowed straight into the asteroid, blooming into a massive fireball. Marcus sagged against the hatch frame, his heart galloping. He stumbled back to the cockpit on rubbery legs, not quite believing they'd actually pulled that off. Sirius swiveled to face him, her purple eyes luminous with new respect. Human clever. Her words came out halting and awkward through the translator, but her meaning was clear. Sirius, thanks. He managed a cocky grin and collapsed into his seat. Behind them, the asteroid field fell away as Sirius steered them into open space. Marcus's fingers danced across the nav computer. Setting a course for way station Zeta, its neutral territory. We can get supplies and repairs, and maybe some answers about what the hell is going on here. Sirius watched his movements, the suspicion and fear in her eyes slowly shifting to something more like curiosity. Why human help, Sirius? She asked after a moment. Ventaxian and human enemy. He looked up, meeting her gaze, struck by the intelligence and depth he saw there, so different yet so familiar. I don't leave people behind. Human, Ventaxian, Kazin, Borg, doesn't matter. You needed help. We're in this mess together now, whether we like it or not. She digested that and gave a single slow nod. An understanding passed between them, a recognition of their shared plight. Human and alien, soldier and prisoner, two lost souls cast adrift in an uncaring universe, clinging to each other in order to survive. The Hyperion knifed through the endless star-flecked abyss, two unlikely allies forging a bond in the crucible of battle. An unbreakable connection born of shared danger and shared deliverance. The future sprawled ahead of them, dark and unknown. But one thing Marcus knew for certain as he watched the galaxy slide by. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Hyperion's engines thrummed as Marcus eased the ship out of the docking bay. Sirius sat beside him in the co-pilot's chair, her purple eyes fixed on the display. The space station shrank behind them, a glittering metallic speck against the vast backdrop of stars. Marcus glanced at his alien companion. You okay? Sirius nodded, her slender fingers tracing patterns on the armrest. Sirius, not used to crowds, many eyes, much anger. As they flew, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of those thugs' hateful glares. He'd seen that look before in the eyes of his fellow soldiers. Hell, he'd probably worn it himself more than once. But now, looking at Sirius, her alien features so strange yet so expressive, he felt ashamed of that old hatred. Hey, he said, breaking the silence. Earlier, when you were telling me about the war, there's still a lot I don't understand. Mind if I ask you some questions? Sirius tilted her head, considering. Then she nodded. Ask, Sirius will try to answer. Marcus took a deep breath. Okay, so your people, the Ventaxians. You said you're an ancient race. How long have you been traveling the stars? Sirius's brow furrowed as she accessed the translator. Many cycles, more than human numbers can count. Ventaxians explored galaxy when humans still in caves. Wow, Marcus whistled. That's a hell of a long time. And humans, we just showed up out of nowhere, huh? Must have been quite a shock. Sirius's mandibles clicked, a Ventaxian expression of agreement. Humans loud, brash. Take what not theirs. Ventaxian elders fear humans destroy balance of galaxy. Marcus winced. Yeah, we can be like that sometimes, but not all of us, you know. Some of us just want to explore, to learn. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. What about you, Sirius, before all this happened? What did you think of humans? Sirius was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she spoke, her words were soft. Sirius, curious, wanted to understand humans, but Ventaxian leaders say humans dangerous. Say stay away. The moment was broken by a shrill alarm from the nav computer. Marcus snapped to attention, scanning the readouts. Shit, we've got company. Looks like a Ventaxian patrol ship closing fast. Sirius leaned forward, her mandibles clicking rapidly. They see us. Not yet, Marcus said, already plotting evasive maneuvers. But they will soon. We need to... He was cut off by a burst of static from the comm system. A harsh, guttural voice filled the cockpit, speaking in the clicking Ventaxian tongue. Sirius's eyes widened in fear. "What is it?" Marcus demanded. "What are they saying?" Sirius's voice trembled as she translated. "They say, all ships in sector must submit to inspection, any human vessels to be destroyed on sight." Marcus's hands tightened on the controls. "Well," he said grimly, "looks like our little adventure just got a lot more complicated." Marcus settled into the pilot's chair, his fingers dancing across the controls as he plotted their course. The nav computer hummed to life, projecting a holographic map of the sector. He traced a path through the glowing web of trade routes, avoiding the hotspots of conflict. "All right, looks like we can hook up with a merchant convoy heading to Hedron in about 6 hours," he called over his shoulder. "Should give us some cover and time for repairs." Sirius padded into the cockpit, her movements graceful despite her alien physiology. She peered at the star chart, purple eyes narrowing as she studied the unfamiliar territory. "This area not safe for Ventaxians," she said, a hint of worry in her musical voice. Marcus nodded grimly. "Yeah, it's rough out here, but safer than Ventaxian space for both of us right now." He pulled up the ship's diagnostic screen, wincing at the long list of system failures and damage reports. "We've got our work cut out for us. Think you can lend a hand with the repairs?" Sirius bobbed her head in a gesture Marcus was starting to recognize as agreement. "Sirius knows ships. We'll help." For the next few hours, they worked in companionable silence. Marcus crawled through access tunnels, replacing burnt-out circuitry and patching hull breaches. Sirius proved to be adept at the delicate work of realigning the nav sensors and recalibrating the shields. As Marcus emerged from an especially tight squeeze in the engine room, wiping grease from his hands, he found Sirius staring at a schematic of the Hyperion systems. "Your ship, primitive but clever," she said, tracing a finger along the power conduits. "Uses principles Ventaxians abandoned cycles ago, but effective." Marcus grinned, oddly pleased by the backhanded compliment. "Yeah, we humans have a knack for making do with what we've got. Speaking of which," he tapped a flashing warning on the screen. "Looks like our starboard thruster's about to give out. We'll need to shut it down for a full overhaul once we reach Hedron." Sirius tilted her head, considering. Perhaps Sirius knows technique. Ventaxian method might work. She guided Marcus through a series of intricate adjustments, her slender grey fingers occasionally brushing against his as she demonstrated. To his surprise, the thruster's output stabilized, the warning fading from angry red to a cautious yellow. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus muttered. "That's a neat trick. Where'd you learn that?" A shadow passed over Sirius's luminous eyes. Is part of training. For long-range scout missions, before... She trailed off, but Marcus understood. Before the war, before everything changed. An alert chimed from the cockpit, breaking the moment. Marcus hurried to check it, Sirius close behind. "So looks like we've got company," he said, scanning the readouts. "Merchant convoy right on schedule, time to join the party." As the Hyperion fell into formation with the lumbering freighters, Marcus felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. They weren't out of danger, not by a long shot. But for now, they had a measure of safety in numbers. Marcus pushed the thoughts aside. Those were problems for tomorrow. For now they had a long journey ahead and a ship that needed their attention, one step at a time, one repair at a time. It was all they could do. The Hyperion shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the swirling maelstrom of subspace collapsing behind them. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on the console, as the Hedron system materialized before them. "There she is," he breathed, a hint of awe in his gruff voice. Looming against the star-speckled void, The Grand Bazaar space station sprawled like a massive metal octopus, its countless docking arms stretching out in all directions. Thousands of ships swarmed around it, their running lights twinkling like fireflies in the inky blackness. Marcus's fingers danced across the controls, engaging the maneuvering thrusters. The battered transport ship responded sluggishly, still bearing the scars of their recent battles. "Biggest traders' hub in the quadrant," he explained, glancing at Sirius. "We'll resupply, patch up the old girl, and blend into the crowd." Sirius leaned closer to the viewport, her luminous purple eyes wide with wonder. Sleek yachts darted between lumbering freighters. Asteroid miners, their hulls scarred and pitted, jockeyed for position alongside gleaming passenger liners. "So many ships," she murmured, her melodious voice filled with awe. Marcus couldn't help but grin at her reaction. For all the fearsome reputation of the Ventaxians, Sirius seemed almost childlike in her fascination. "Just wait till you see it up close, kid," he chuckled. "This is barely scratching the surface." The comm crackled to life, a bored-sounding traffic controller rattling off docking instructions. Marcus acknowledged and guided the Hyperion towards their assigned berth. As they drew closer, the sheer scale of the station became apparent. What had seemed like pinholes of light determination into vast hangar bays and sprawling marketplaces visible through transparent sections of hull. With a series of metallic clangs, the docking clamps engaged, securing the Hyperion in place. Marcus ran through the shutdown sequence, his movements quick and practiced. "Ready to stretch your legs?" he asked Sirius. She nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension on her alien features. Marcus led the way to the airlock, cycling it open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The moment they stepped onto the concourse, Marcus felt Sirius press close to his side. The cacophony of sounds, smells, and sights was overwhelming even for him. He could only imagine how it must feel to someone who'd never experienced anything like it. Beings of every conceivable shape and size jostled through the cramped walkways. A group of towering insectoids clicked and chirped as they examined wares at a nearby stall. A pair of reptilian traders argued loudly in sibilant tones, forked tongues flicking in agitation. Robed figures glided serenely through the chaos, compound eyes swiveling to take in every detail. The recycled air was thick with the aromas of 100 alien cuisines, mingling with the acrid tang of engine exhaust and the musk of too many bodies in too small a space. The constant clanging of machinery and tools provided a percussive counterpoint to the babel of 1,000 different languages. Marcus felt Sirius trembling slightly and instinctively placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He noticed a trio of rough-looking spacers eyeing her with predatory interest and shifted his stance, putting himself between them and his alien companion. "Stay close," he muttered. "We'll be fine as long as we keep our heads down." Guiding Sirius through the press of bodies, Marcus made his way towards the heart of the concourse. Here the open-air market sprawled in every direction, a labyrinth of stalls and kiosks offering everything from ship parts to exotic pets. Marcus produced his universal credit chit, bartering with a succession of merchants. Each negotiation was a dance of raised voices and theatrical gestures, but he soon had a hovering cargo sledge piled high with components and tools. At one stall, a grizzled vendor with more arms than eyes tried to shortchange him on a fuel injection assembly. Marcus pounded his fist on the counter, unleashing a torrent of colorful invective that made even the hardened spacers nearby wince. The merchant quickly capitulated, beads of sweat forming on his leathery hide. Throughout it all, Sirius watched with rapt attention, drinking in every detail of this alien world. Her gaze darted from face to face, taking in the myriad forms of life around her. As they made their way back towards the Hyperion, laden with supplies, a group of clearly intoxicated spacers staggered into their path. One of them, a hulking Zelgoran with mottled green skin, fixed his bleary gaze on Sirius. Before his fingers could make contact, Marcus moved. In one fluid motion, he seized the Zelgoran by his grimy jumpsuit and slammed him against the nearest bulkhead. "Watch your filthy mouth," Marcus snarled, his face inches from the alien's, "or I'll weld it shut." The Zelgoran's companions tensed, hands drifting towards concealed weapons. For a heartbeat, violence hung in the air like a storm about to break. Then Marcus released his grip, letting the drunkard slide to the deck in a babbling heap. Back aboard the Hyperion, Marcus immediately set to work, deftly installing the newly acquired parts. His movements were quick and precise, born of years of experience. As he worked, he felt Sirius's eyes on him, watching his every move. "You risked your life," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder, "to defend me against one of your own kind." Marcus paused, meeting her alien gaze. There was no fear there, no judgment, only gratitude and something deeper, harder to define. "So you're one of my people now, Scout," he said gruffly. "Where I come from, you don't let folks get hurt, don't matter what uniform they wear or what planet they're from." As he turned back to his work, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years, not since he'd left the service. In this fragile alien, he'd found something worth protecting, something that transcended the petty squabbles between their species. The stars beckoned beyond the station's protective shell. Their journey was a long way to go, and dangers lurked in the void. But for the first time in longer than he cared to admit, Marcus Stevens had a guiding light. And her name was Sirius. Sirius's luminous purple eyes swept over the ragtag assemblage before them, her slender form tensing imperceptibly beneath the angular Ventaxian combat plating. The air hung thick with the acrid stench of unwashed bodies and cheap stimulants, a palpable miasma of desperation and violence barely held in check. Marcus leaned forward, his scarred hands splayed on the sticky tabletop. "All right, you sorry lot," he growled, voice carrying easily over the din of the tavern. "We're putting together a crew for a long haul into the deep black. It'll be dangerous, it'll be dirty, and the pay might not be worth a damn if we all end up spacing ourselves, but it beats rotting in this cesspool. Who's in?" A chorus of guttural chuckles and derisive snorts answered him. A towering Krolosian, its chitinous exoskeleton pitted and scarred, clicked its mandibles in what might have been amusement. "Bold words, fleshbag," it rasped. "But what's the job? Smuggling? Piracy? Or are you just looking to get yourself killed?" Marcus's eyes narrowed behind his faceplate. "Let's just say we've got some interested parties who'd rather see us dead than succeed. Could be a suicide run. Could be the score of a lifetime. You in or out?" The Krolosian's compound eyes glittered in the dim light. It flexed its serrated forelimbs, clearly weighing its options. After a tense moment, it bobbed its armored head. "I'm Krasithak. My blade is yours, for now." One by one, the others stepped forward. A pair of Saurian twins, scales gleaming with bioluminescent patterns. A hulking Ursan, with cybernetic augmentations grafted crudely to its massive frame. A spindly arachnoid that seemed to exist in a perpetual blur of motion, digits twitching over an array of esoteric weaponry. As Marcus haggled over terms and rates, Sirius found her gaze drawn to a figure lurking at the edges of the group. Humanoid, but with an unsettling fluidity to its movements. It caught her staring and cocked its head, features rippling and shifting like quicksilver. The negotiations concluded swiftly, credits changing hands and crude contracts sealed with bloodied thumbprints and DNA samples. As the newly minted crew filed out to gather their gear, Marcus turned to Sirius, his expression unreadable behind the battered faceplate. "Last chance to back out, Scout," he said quietly. "Once we leave Drakara, there's no turning back. We'll be in the wind, with half the galaxy gunning for us." Sirius straightened, her alien features set in a mask of grit. "I've already come too far to turn back now," she replied, her musical voice carrying an edge of steel. "Whatever awaits us out there in the void, we face it together." Marcus nodded, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Then let's get the hell off this rock and see what kind of trouble we can stir up." They rose from the booth, the force screen flickering and dying as they stepped away. The tavern's patrons parted before them, a mix of fear and grudging respect in their alien gazes. As they reached the exit, a gnarled hand seized Marcus's arm. The Krathian bartender leered up at them. its eye stalks weaving drunkenly. "Word of advice, meat," it slurred. "Whatever game you're playing, it's bigger than you think. Forces beyond your comprehension are moving. Watch the shadows." Marcus shrugged off its grip, but Sirius saw a flicker of unease cross his weathered features. Without another word, they plunged back into the teeming corridors of Drakkara Station, the newly recruited crew falling in behind them like a pack of feral predators. As they approached the docking bay where the Hyperion waited, Sirius felt a tremor of anticipation ripple through her. The vast emptiness of space beckoned, promising both peril and possibility in equal measure. Whatever lay ahead, she knew that her fate was now inexorably bound to that of this enigmatic human, and the battered ship that had become their sanctuary. The airlock cycled open with a hiss, and they stepped into the familiar confines of the Hyperion. As the ragtag crew settled in, stowing gear and claiming bunks, Marcus made his way to the cockpit. Sirius followed, her steps light despite the weight of her armor. Marcus's hands danced over the controls, bringing the ship's systems online. The deck thrummed beneath their feet as the engines spooled up, a deep bass note that seemed to resonate in Sirius's very bones. Marcus's eyes gleamed with a fierce light as he punched in the coordinates. "The far reaches," he said, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "Time to see if those Ventaxian colonies of yours are more than just spacer's tales." The Hyperion's engines roared to life, and they burst free of Drakkara Station's gravitational embrace. As they accelerated into the star-flecked void, Sirius felt a surge of mingled fear and exhilaration. The next chapter of their journey was about to begin, and there was no telling where it might lead them. The grimy crew of mercenaries shuffled forward, their eyes narrowed as they sized up Marcus and Sirius. The air in the cramped space hung thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and cheap booze. A towering roofrack, its rocky carapace catching the dim light, let out a guttural hiss. The sound grated against Marcus's ears, but he kept his face impassive. With practiced ease, Marcus flicked open a battered data slate. The holographic display flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow over the assembled group. The contract's text hovered in the air, a stark contrast to the filth surrounding them. "Standard Merc package," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the background noise of the station. 6 months hazard pay up front, salvage rights on anything not bolted down, full med coverage if you end up taking a spacewalk without a suit." He paused, meeting each mercenary's gaze in turn. "Equal split on the spoils, no complaints when we crack this thing wide open." A scarred human with a glowing cybernetic eye snorted, the sound more electronic than organic. "Terms, that's new. Your type usually just shanghais us and calls it a day." Before Marcus could retort, movement caught his eye. A female Naxa slithered forward, her cobalt scales reflecting the holographic light. Her clawed feet left shallow grooves in the sticky floor as she approached. The Naxa's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air, her unblinking gaze fixed on Sirius. "I smell Confederation," she hissed. "This one bears their mark." Sirius stood stock still, seemingly mesmerized by the Naxa's serpentine grace. After a tense moment, the reptilian mercenary dipped her head. "I am Sishilith. I will follow the outsider's path, for my cut of the prize." One by one, the other mercenaries grunted their assent. Even the cyborg human nodded grudgingly. Nox was always a sucker for the weird jobs. We're in. Marcus slapped the data slate against his armored palm. The sound echoed in the confined space as the contracts were sealed with an encrypted burst of data. "Gear up," he ordered. "We're on a tight schedule. I want us gone before anyone realizes we were here." The mercenaries dispersed, gathering their meager possessions and checking their weapons. Marcus led the group to the Hyperion's airlock, Sirius at his side. Just before cycling the lock, she turned to address their new crew. The mercenaries exchanged glances, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity on their alien features. Marcus simply nodded to Sirius, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "Time to earn our pay," he rumbled. "Let's make history." The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. As they filed aboard the Hyperion, The deck plates thrummed to life beneath their feet. Marcus made his way to the cockpit, his fingers dancing over the controls. With a roar of engines, the battered freighter broke free of Drakara Station's gravitational hold. They accelerated into the star-flecked void, leaving behind a corkscrewing trail of burnt engine exhaust. As the Hyperion streaked away from the station, carrying its unlikely crew of warriors and dreamers, the vastness of space seemed to hold its breath. Whatever lay ahead for this motley band, one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same. The Hyperion's engines thrummed with barely contained power as it hurtled through the void. In the cramped crew quarters, the air hung heavy with tension. Marcus stood at the center, his weathered armor creaking as he gestured to the shimmering hollow map. "Calhiran Cluster," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Not much out there but rocks and trouble." The mercenaries leaned in, their diverse forms casting strange shadows on the bulkheads. Nox, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly, snorted. "Sounds like a waste of time. We chasing ghosts now?" Marcus's hand clenched, the servos in his gauntlet whining. "There's more to it. Scout team went dark out there. No check-ins, no nothing." Sirius stepped from the shadows, her purple eyes piercing the gloom. "We seek more than lost comrades," she said, her melodic voice carrying an edge of steel. "There are whispers of something ancient, something that should not be awakened." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Krasthak, the Krolosian, clicked his mandibles nervously. "What manner of evil do you speak of, alien?" Sirius's gaze swept over them, her slender form taut with tension. "The Ankri," she said softly, "a cult dedicated to cosmic horrors beyond mortal comprehension. If they have found what they seek—" She trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air. The mercenaries shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Marcus stepped closer to Sirius, his voice low. "You're talking about things that make even your high and mighty Ventaxians shake in their boots. What aren't you telling me?" Sirius met his gaze, her luminous eyes filled with a mix of fear and drive. "There are forces in this universe, Marcus, that should remain dormant. If the Ankri have truly found a way to rouse them—" She shuddered, her alien features contorting in a grimace. Marcus reached out, his armored hand gripping her shoulder. "Whatever's out there," he growled, "we'll face it together. That's a promise." The Hyperion surged onward, plunging deeper into the uncharted depths of space. As the crew dispersed to their stations, the reality of their mission settled over them like a shroud. They were no longer mere soldiers of fortune, but warriors standing against the encroaching darkness of the cosmos itself. In the cockpit, Marcus eased into the pilot's chair, his fingers dancing over the controls. Sirius took her place beside him, her alien presence a comfort in the face of the unknown. "Setting course for the Calhiran cluster," Marcus announced, his voice carrying through the ship's comm system. "All hands, prepare for deep space insertion. We're about to find out what kind of horrors are waiting for us in the dark." The Hyperion's engines flared, propelling them towards their destiny. As they left the last vestiges of charted space behind, the crew of outcasts and misfits steeled themselves for the trials ahead. Whatever awaited them in the whispered dead space, they would face it as one, the vanguard against an ancient evil that threatened to consume all of creation. The Hyperion shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the swirling vortex of subspace energy dissipating behind them. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, eyes scanning the sensor displays. The screens painted a chaotic vista of debris fields and tumbling asteroids, each pitted and cratered. "Looks like we arrived just in time for the after-party," Marcus muttered, his hands moving deftly over the controls. He brought the ship to a cautious vector, the sound of debris pinging off the Hyperion's shielding, filling the bridge like a steady, ominous percussion. Sirius hunched over the tactical station, her slender fingers flying across the haptic controls. Data streams scrolled past her luminous purple eyes as she passed the information. "There," she said, her voice taut. "Transponder traces consistent with Ventaxian scout ships up ahead." Her gaze narrowed as she tracked ghostly engine signatures sifting through the rubble belt. Marcus nodded grimly. I have them. Going to sublight thrusters only. Could be armed mines or proximity triggers in that junk field. The Hyperion inched forward, its engines barely above idle. As they closed in, an unsettling vista emerged. 3 Ventaxian scout vessels hung in the void, their sleek arrowhead hulls now shattered and cratered. One had been torn virtually in half, its forward section drifting endlessly away from the still-burning drive core. Shylith's hiss cut through the tense silence. This is no mere pirate's ambush. Marcus's grip tightened on the control yoke, his nucleus tightening beneath his gauntlets. Agreed. Seems we found those missing scouts all right. He glanced at Sirius, struck by the utter stillness of her expression as she beheld the floating tomb of her comrades. Can you pick up any emergency beacons or life readings? He asked. Could be survivors still out there. Sirius's voice hitched slightly as she responded. Scanning, but the interference from those wrecks is severe. She paused, lines of data crawling across her screen. I have something. One faint energy signature, several clicks out in that debris spin. She highlighted a sector filled with slow-turning chunks of twisted hull and sheared bulkheads. Without hesitation, Marcus swung the Hyperion in that direction. All hands make ready for combat operation and possible rescue attempt, he barked over the intercom. We've got the potential for live bodies out there, so keep your shooting briefs tight and aim carefully unless fired upon. Bridge out. In the dimly lit armory, the mercenary crew checked their weapons and armor seals. Nox hefted his heavy plasma cannon, its capacitors thrumming as it charged to full power. Here's hoping whatever awaits doesn't take a big chunk out of my bonus payout, he rumbled, steel teeth glinting. We all know how hit and miss the resurrection tanks can be. Marcus brought the Hyperion in as close as he dared, the ship jostling and shuddering as micrometeors pelted their shielding. Launching shuttle now, he said tersely into his comm. Get that beacon on the double and report back. The shuttle detached from the Hyperion, its maneuvering thrusters flaring against the darkness as it blasted towards the target coordinates. Aboard, Sirius stared fixedly through the forward viewport, her face hardened. As the shuttle passed through the outer edges of the debris cloud, exterior cameras flickered to life. A hellish vista of shredded wreckage twisted and spun in a deadly cyclone of silent, perpetual motion. Jagged ribs and torn bulkheads glided past, shrouded in clouds of sparkling detritus. At the eye of this whirlpool of destruction drifted a single small escape pod. Its hull was scorched black, one entire side buckling inward, but faint signs of power still flickered within. The shuttle edged closer, grappling arms extending to latch onto the pod's scorched flank. Nox aimed his weapon at the hatch, slagging away buckled plating with a searing arc of plasma fire. His helmet lamp illuminated the huddled, shivering form within, a Ventaxian warrior in slate-grey combat armor, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle. Flickering purple photoreceptors stared back at them hollowly through the sliced opening. On the Hyperion's bridge, Marcus watched the recovery on the monitors. We've got one. Repeat, one live body recovered. Beside him, Sirius rose silently and strode towards the shuttle docking bay. As the inner hatch cycled open, she approached the huddled form amid the mercenaries. Kneeling, she reached out and slowly removed the warrior's helmet. Matted tangles of ebon hair fell away, revealing the abraded, gaunt features of a female Ventaxian no older than Sirius herself. The survivor's swollen eyes blinked up at her rescuer in disbelief. "Hey, it's over now, Sister Scout," Sirius said, her musical voice cutting through the tense hush. "You're safe." She clasped the girl's undamaged hand firmly. "I'm here." As the survivor gasped in a rasping lungful of clean air, Marcus watched from the corridor's edge. A profound shiver traced its way down his spine as he glimpsed something deeper than ancient hatreds, a primal thread of fellowship that transcended all boundaries. Here at the ragged edge of the abyss, hope shone inviolate, an eternal beacon defying the encroaching darkness. And as Sirius tended to her rescued comrade, Marcus swore a silent oath. Whatever terror awaited them in this shattered wake of the whispered dead space, he would not allow it to be victorious. There was now a riptide of cosmic justice rising to meet that malevolence, and Marcus Stevens would ride its vanguard fury straight into the nightmare's heart. The medbay fell silent, save for the soft hum of life support systems and the rhythmic beeping of Neera's vitals. Marcus's eyes darted from one crew member to another, gauging their reactions. Nox had gone pale, his cybernetic eye flickering erratically. Shillith's scales had taken on a sickly hue, her tail now stock-still against the deck. Sirius turned to him, her luminous eyes burning with an intensity he'd never seen before. There is no rationality to be found in the face of the unsayable, Marcus. What we confront defies comprehension. The ship's intercom crackled to life, Krazathak's clicking mandibles transmitting from the bridge. "Captain, we're detecting unusual energy fluctuations in the nearby debris field. Recommend immediate withdrawal to a safe distance." Marcus nodded, despite knowing the Krolosian couldn't see him. "Acknowledged. Plot us a course out of here, but keep us within sensor range. We need to gather more data." As the Hyperion's engines thrummed to life, Marcus felt the deck plates vibrate beneath his feet. He turned back to the assembled crew, his voice low and steady. "I know we're all shaken by what we've learned, but we signed on for this mission, and we're seeing it through." Nox let out a bitter laugh. Signed on to face down eldritch horrors from beyond space and time? Must have missed that clause in the contract. "We adapt," Marcus replied firmly. "It's what we do. Now, Sirius, I need you to dig into those archives you mentioned. Any information on these shrills could be critical." Sirius inclined her head, her slender form seeming to radiate a newfound gravity. "I shall commune with the ship's quantum core, access the forbidden databanks. But be warned, Marcus, some knowledge comes at a terrible price." As the crew dispersed to their stations, Marcus lingered in the medbay, his gaze drawn to Neera's motionless form. The young Ventaxian floated in her regeneration pod, oblivious to the cosmic horror she had unleashed upon them all. The Hyperion surged away from the debris field, its sensors straining to capture every scrap of data from the anomalous region. As Marcus made his way to the bridge, he could feel the weight of their newfound knowledge pressing down upon him. The Hyperion lurched violently as it plunged deeper into the Shathran debris field. Marcus's hands danced across the control panel, his mind focused tight as he fought to keep the ship steady. The viewport filled with a chaotic swirl of twisted metal and scorched hull fragments, each piece a silent testament to the carnage that had unfolded here. "Sirius, talk to me," Marcus called out, his voice strained as he wrestled with the controls. "What are we looking at?" As if to punctuate her words, a massive chunk of what might have once been a starship's engine core tumbled past, missing the Hyperion's hull by mere meters. Marcus swore under his breath, adjusting their trajectory to avoid a collision. "These aren't natural debris patterns," Sirius continued, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Look at the scoring on that hull fragment." Marcus spared a glance at the view screen she indicated. The jagged piece of metal bore strange, swirling patterns that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "What am I looking at, Sirius?" "Evidence of severe heating and spatial distortion," she replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It matches Neera's report exactly. These wrecks, they've been warped at the molecular level. Classic signs of chronospatial anomalies." Before Marcus could respond, the ship bucked wildly, nearly spinning them end over end. He gritted his teeth, muscles straining as he fought to bring them back under control. "Damn it! These eddies are getting worse." In the tense silence that followed, Marcus's thoughts drifted to their newest passenger. Neera, the Ventaxian scout they'd rescued, lay in the medbay below decks, still grappling with the psychic aftermath of whatever horror she'd witnessed out here. A flashing alert on his console snapped Marcus back to the present. "Sirius, we've got something on scanners. Dead ahead." Through the debris field, a familiar silhouette came into view. The unmistakable form of a Ventaxian scout ship escape pod. It tumbled end over end, battered and scarred, but miraculously intact. "Marcus, we have to—" Sirius began, but he was already moving. "On it," he growled, fingers flying across the controls. The Hyperion's grappling arrays hummed to life, lancing out through the void to snag the pod. With painstaking precision, Marcus guided it into the starboard airlock. The moment the outer hatch sealed, Sirius was out of her seat, racing towards the airlock. Marcus keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, we've recovered another escape pod. Security team to the starboard airlock now." By the time Marcus reached the airlock, the scene before him sent a chill down his spine. The mercenary squad stood with weapons drawn, all trained on the battered hatch of the escape pod. Sirius crouched by the manual release, her face a mask of concentration as she worked to bypass the pod's locking mechanism. With a hiss of escaping air, the hatch swung open. Marcus's hand tightened on his sidearm as Sirius peered inside. The Ventaxian's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the pounding of his own heart. "Ancestors preserve," Sirius whispered, reaching into the pod. Marcus watched as she carefully extracted a figure clad in the tattered remains of a void suit. The helmet came away, revealing another Ventaxian, a female, her once proud features now sunken and drawn, frozen in an expression of abject terror. Trails of dried lavender ichor streaked from her nose and eyes, a grim testament to the ordeal she'd endured. For a moment all was still. Then, with a suddenness that made Marcus flinch, the rescued Ventaxian's body convulsed. Her back arched impossibly, mouth stretching wide in a silent scream of primal horror. Sirius recoiled instinctively, stumbling back as the scout's body began to wither before their eyes. "Hope and fire," Marcus roared, but even as the air filled with the searing heat of plasma bolts, he knew it was too late. The Ventaxian's form crumbled, dissipating into a cloud of pale, drifting motes that scattered across the deck plating. In the deafening silence that followed, Marcus became aware of a new sound, a soft, insidious whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the ship. It slithered through his mind, a wordless promise of terrors yet to come. His comm crackled to life, his own voice sounding strange and distant to his ears. "Starboard airlock to bridge. Report, Scout. What in the name of the whisper just happened down there?" Sirius stood motionless, her luminous eyes wide with shock. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. The Scout. She is—" She trailed off, watching another cascade of ashen remains drift by. Ancestors have mercy. She was still alive. Marcus felt the weight of command settle heavily on his shoulders. They stood at the precipice of something vast and terrible, a darkness that defied comprehension. Yet even as that realization sank in, he knew they had no choice but to press on. "Tell me we're still go for entering, Scout," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "I need your call on this one." Sirius closed her eyes, visibly wrestling with the decision. When she opened them again, they blazed with a fierce tenacity. "If we turn back now, the darkness we sought may pursue us. Here at least we hold the higher ground, and perhaps an advantage over it." Her gaze fell to the scattered ashes at her feet, a grim reminder of the price of their mission. "We have no choice," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "We finish what was awakened here before it joins the hunger of the void itself." As Sirius spoke, Marcus felt a chill of realization creep through him. They had crossed a threshold, stepped into a realm where the very concepts of life and death blurred into something other. Whatever awaited them in the depths of this cosmic abyss, their fates were now inexorably bound to it. The whisper grew louder, a sibilant promise of oblivion that echoed through the corridors of the Hyperion. Marcus squared his shoulders, meeting Sirius's gaze with grim perseverance. They would face this nameless horror together, pushing back against the encroaching darkness for as long as they drew breath. And beyond that, the eternal silence of the void awaited, patient and unyielding as the stars themselves. The Hyperion shuddered violently as it plunged into the heart of the eldritch megastructure. Alarms blared, drowning out the groans of straining metal. Sparks erupted from overloaded consoles, cascading across the bridge in a deadly light show. The Ventaxian's luminous eyes flicked rapidly between displays. "Hull stress at 87% and climbing," she reported, voice tight. "We're bleeding atmosphere from decks 3 through 7. A violent lurch threw them sideways. Marcus cursed, wrestling the ship back on course. Outside the viewports, reality itself seemed to warp and twist. Tendrils of fractal energy lashed at the Hyperion's shields, each impact sending tremors through the deck plates. "Xenox," Marcus barked into the comm. "Reroute all non-essential power to forward shields. We're going in hot." As they hurtled deeper into the anomalies more, the very fabric of space-time began to unravel around them. Shilty's scales rippled with a chromatic sheen as she clung to her station. "The corruption! It seeks to unmake us!" she hissed. Marcus gritted his teeth, eyes fixed on the swirling vortex ahead. "Not today, it doesn't. Sirius, punch it!" The Hyperion's engines screamed in protest as they surged forward. For a moment, it seemed as if the ship might tear itself apart. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, they breached the final barrier. They emerged into a realm beyond comprehension. Vast, impossible structures of protomatter stretched as far as the eye could see. Stellar nurseries pulsed with unborn suns, while the husks of dead galaxies drifted like cosmic flotsam. Before anyone could respond, proximity alarms shrieked to life. On the sensors, a swarm of nightmarish entities converged on their position. Marcus's lips peeled back in a feral grin. "Let's show these cosmic abortions what happens when they mess with humanity. All hands, battle stations." The Hyperion's weapon systems hummed to life, targeting arrays locking onto the incoming swarm. As the first wave of monstrosities closed in, Marcus's finger hovered over the trigger. "Eat antimatter, you galactic cum-stains," he snarled and opened fire. Lances of coherent energy erupted from the Hyperion's hardpoints, carving swathes of destruction through the oncoming horde. Hyperdimensional ordnance detonated in silent reality-warping explosions, crushing entire squadrons of the alien spawn into singularities. But for every creature they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The swarm pressed in, relentless and maddened. "We can't keep this up forever," Sirius shouted, her hands flying over the navigation controls. "We need to push through." Marcus nodded grimly. "All right, people, hold on to your asses. We're going in." With a defiant roar of its engines, the Hyperion surged forward, ploughing through the seething mass of alien flesh and energy. Warnings blared as the hull temperature skyrocketed, ablative plating sloughing away in molten sheets. They burst through the other side of the swarm, trailing fire and debris. Ahead loomed their target, a pulsating, obscene construct that could only be the core of the Whisper's essence. Marcus's hands tightened on the controls. "You heard the lady. Let's introduce this cosmic horror to a little human ingenuity." The Hyperion streaked towards the throbbing heart of the megastructure, weapons primed and ready. As they closed in, Marcus felt a presence, vast, alien, and utterly malevolent, take notice of their approach. A psychic scream tore through their minds as the Whisper's full attention focused on the intruders. Reality buckled around them, the very laws of physics twisting in knots as the entity sought to crush them. "Hold together," Marcus growled through clenched teeth. "We're almost there, just a little further." The Hyperion plunged into the roiling mass of the core, hull screaming, as it was subjected to forces beyond mortal comprehension. For a moment, it seemed as if they would be torn apart, unmade at the most fundamental level. Then, with a sound like the birth of a universe, they breached the final barrier and found themselves in the very heart of the cosmic abomination. The Hyperion shuddered violently as it breached the puckered stellar corona at the heart of the gestating Whisper organism. Marcus's teeth rattled in his skull as reality itself cracked and sheared apart around them. Waves of superheated plasma washed over the hull, overwhelming the Dechion fields and ripping through the ship's defenses. The Ventaxian's fingers flew across her console, her luminous eyes wide with strain. "Hull integrity at 37% and dropping. We're losing atmospheric containment on multiple decks." A massive tremor rocked the bridge as another volley of matter-antimatter reactions detonated against their shields. Sparks erupted from overloaded consoles, showering the crew in a cascade of burning debris. Through the viewscreen, Marcus watched in horror as the very fabric of space-time twisted and warped around them. "Knox," he shouted into the comm, "status on weapons." The mercenary's voice crackled back, thick with frustration. "We're bone dry, Skipper. Emptied every last round into that cosmic shitstorm, and it didn't even blink." Marcus cursed, his hands white-knuckled on the controls as he fought to keep the Hyperion from tumbling into the maelstrom of protonic cyclones that raged around them. The ship groaned under the onslaught, its armored baffles straining to radiate away the searing heat of the stellar foundry. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the comm channel. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized the voice of one of the mercenaries. "What the hell is happening down there?" Sirius's face paled, her alien features contorting in horror as she studied the internal sensors. "Marcus, the scout ships we passed, they're changing. The Whisper is reanimating them, twisting them into something wrong." Through the failing structural integrity fields, Marcus caught glimpses of nightmarish transformations. The husks of dead Ventaxian vessels bulged and writhed, their metal surfaces flowing like liquid as they were reshaped by forces beyond comprehension. And amidst it all, the agonized cries of the mercenary squad, as they too were caught in the Whisper's grip. "We have to get out of here," Sirius cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "Our hyper-trajectory is destabilizing. We're becoming temporally embedded." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the words died in his throat as he beheld the true face of their enemy. Through the disintegrating canopy, he saw it, the eternal visage of the Whisper awareness coalescing amidst the stellar inferno. An obsidian mountain of fractured reality rose before them, its jagged planes and impossible geometries defying the very laws of physics. It was a glimpse into the primordial void that existed before the dawn of creation, and its mere presence threatened to unmake everything it touched. From the abyssal peak, a tendril of ultra-dense matter extended towards the Hyperion. Marcus felt the ship lurch as it was caught in the entity's grasp, their very quantum structure beginning to unravel. "Marcus," Sirius gasped, her eyes wide with terror and something else, a flash of recognition that transcended their current predicament. "It knows us." Fighting against the cosmic forces threatening to tear them apart, Marcus snarled in defiance. He wouldn't let it end like this, not after everything they'd been through. With a roar of dedication, he triggered the ship's reserve mass capacitors and overloaded the remaining drive clusters. "Hang on to something," he shouted, raising his sidearm and emptying its entire magazine into the swelling plasma reaction. The resulting detonation was beyond anything Marcus had ever experienced. For a single, eternal instant, their very existence shattered and scattered across the cosmic void. Then, with a rush of agony and disorientation, they snapped back into cohesion. The Hyperion tumbled end over end, trailing debris and reactor ejector as it emerged from the collapsing megastructure. Marcus's vision swam, his body screaming in protest as he fought to regain control of the ship. Beside him, Sirius slumped in her harness, her luminous eyes unfocused but still burning with life. As the universe spun wildly around them, Marcus reached out and pulled Sirius into a fierce embrace. They clung to each other, battered survivors of an ordeal beyond human comprehension. In that moment of connection, something passed between them, a shared understanding of the cosmic horror they had witnessed and the trials that lay ahead. The Hyperion's engines flared weakly, pushing them away from the dying stellar anomaly. But even as they fled, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The Whisper had been wounded, but not destroyed. Its malevolent presence still lingered at the edges of reality, promising a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of creation. As they limped back across the cosmic void, twin embers of defiance against the encroaching darkness, Marcus held Sirius close and whispered a vow. "We'll find a way to stop it, whatever it takes." The Ventaxian's grip tightened, her voice barely audible over the ship's failing systems. "Together." Behind them, the infinite abyssal night chittered with countless malformed voices, a promise of horrors yet to come. "Fearsome soon." The Hyperion shuddered violently as it emerged from the hyperspace window, its hull glowing cherry red from the strain. Marcus's fingers danced across the controls, fighting to stabilize their tumbling trajectory. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship, drowning out the groans of overstressed metal. "Sirius, I need those nav calculations now!" Marcus shouted into the intercom, his voice tight with urgency. In the cramped machine bay, Sirius and Nox worked frantically, their hands a blur as they spliced together jury-rigged navigational matrices. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, singeing Sirius's pale grey skin. "Power fluctuating wildly," she called out, her luminous purple eyes fixed on the fluctuating readouts. "Hyperspatial inducers are redlining. We might have one jump left before total system failure." Nox's augmetic jaw whirred as he integrated a bypass subroutine. "Better make it count or we'll be cosmic dust." The ship lurched violently, nearly throwing them off their feet. Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Whatever you're doing back there, do it faster. We've got company." Shilty's sibilant tones cut through the chaos, multiple hostile entities materializing. The whispers spawn approach. On the sensor displays, eldritch energy signatures bloomed like cancerous growths, reaching out towards the battered Hyperion. Sirius felt a chill run down her spine as she locked eyes with Nox. "We're out of time," she whispered, her fingers flying over the controls as she finalized the desperate calculations. With a thought, she uploaded the new heading directly to Marcus's console. "Brace for emergency translation," Sirius shouted, her voice edged with static. "All systems go critical in 5, 4. The Hyperion's engines screamed in protest as Marcus punched it, hurling them into the roiling maw of unreality. For an eternal instant, the crew's very existence scattered across dimensions beyond comprehension. Then, with a bone-jarring lurch, they snapped back into coherence. The viewports filled with an impossible vista, a vast graveyard of titanic derelicts stretching as far as the eye could see. City-sized hulks of alien metal drifted in the void, their designs defying mortal understanding. Before anyone could process the sight, proximity alarms shrieked to life. The ancient hulks were stirring, shrugging off eons of slumber as they sensed the Hyperion's intrusion. A voice like the death rattle of universes boomed across the comms. "They have entered the graveyard of eternities. Their light draws us forth." Weapons snapped to readiness as the crew beheld monstrous constructs lurching to life all around them. Marcus's laugh was equal parts terror and exhilaration as he called out, "Looks like we crashed one hell of a family reunion. All hands to battle stations." The Hyperion systems flared to life, tactical displays materializing as they prepared to face the impossible horrors awakening all around them. The Hyperion's engines groaned as they pushed the battered vessel through the cosmic detritus. Shards of reality scraped against the hull, leaving glowing furrows in their wake. Marcus's hands danced across the controls, his eyes darting between readouts and the chaotic vista beyond the view screen. "Serious damage report," he barked, his voice hoarse from the acrid smoke still lingering on the bridge. The Ventaxian's fingers flew over her console, her luminous eyes narrowed in concentration. "Hull integrity at 23%, life support systems barely functional. We're venting atmosphere from decks 3 through 7. Nox stumbled to his feet, sparks spitting from a damaged cybernetic implant. "I've rerouted power to essential systems, but we're running on fumes here, boss." Marcus nodded grimly, his gaze fixed on the swirling void ahead. The remnants of the ancient dreadnought dissolved into cosmic dust behind them, but the graveyard of derelict ships stretched on into infinity. A sudden lurch sent the crew sprawling. Alarms blared as another behemoth stirred to life, its impossible geometry twisting as it oriented towards the Hyperion. "Fuck me sideways," Nox spat, hauling himself back to his station. "These undead bastards just don't know when to quit." Marcus's lips curled into a feral grin. "Then we'll just have to teach them. Sirius, plot us a course through that debris field. Nox, give me every scrap of power you can squeeze out of those engines." The Hyperion surged forward, weaving between colossal husks of long-dead civilizations. Energy tendrils lashed out from the pursuing Leviathan, missing the nimble freighter by mere meters. "Marcus," Sirius called out, her voice tight with urgency, "I'm detecting a massive gravitational anomaly dead ahead. It could be our ticket out of this nightmare." He nodded, teeth bared in a rictus of concentration. "Then that's where we're headed. All hands brace for extreme maneuvers." The Hyperion dove towards the roiling vortex of space-time, its hull screaming in protest. Behind them, the ancient pursuer unleashed a barrage of eldritch energies that warped and twisted reality itself. Marcus's world narrowed to a laser focus on their trajectory, his every fiber attuned to the ship's rattling frame. With a final burst of acceleration, they plunged into the maw of the anomaly. For an eternal instant, existence ceased to have meaning. The crew's very atoms scattered and reassembled countless times as they rode the cusp of oblivion. Then, with a thunderous crack, they erupted back into normal space. The Hyperion tumbled end over end, systems flickering and dying across the board. As the ship's rotation slowed, a new vista revealed itself through the cracked viewports. A vast nebula stretched before them, its swirling colors a stark contrast to the cosmic graveyard they'd left behind. Sirius's voice broke the stunned silence. We made it." Marcus slumped in his chair, allowing himself a moment of relief before the grim reality of their situation reasserted itself. They'd escaped one hell, but the war was not nearly finished. He keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, damage control, we're not out of this yet." As the crew scrambled to assess their battered vessel, Marcus shared a wordless glance with Sirius. In her alien eyes, he saw the same fire that burned within him, a tenacity to see this through, at any expense. The Hyperion drifted deeper into the nebula, its scarred hull a testament to the battles fought and the horrors yet to come. For now, they had survived, but the Whisper's influence stretched across realities. Their respite would be brief, the next challenge looming just beyond the cosmic horizon. The Hyperion's engines sputtered and whined as Marcus guided the battered freighter through the cosmic minefield. Streams of exotic particles cascaded across the viewports, casting eerie shadows on the bridge. Marcus's fingers danced over the controls, making minute adjustments to keep them on course. "Sirius, how are those long-range scans looking?" he called out, eyes never leaving the chaotic vista before them. The Ventaxian scout's luminous eyes flickered rapidly as she processed the incoming data. Massive energy fluctuations dead ahead. The readings are unlike anything I've ever seen. Marcus leaned in, studying the holographic display. Writhing tendrils of ultra-dense matter snaked across the screen, twisting and coiling around a pulsing nexus of raw gravitational force. "What in the seven hell?" he muttered, brow furrowing beneath his armored faceplate. "That maelstrom's pulling in everything around it. Even light can't escape its grasp." Sirius nodded grimly. Some kind of interdimensional rift, perhaps, or a boundary layer between realities. Marcus's hand hovered over the navigation controls. "We should plot a new course. Those vortices will tear us apart if we get too close." "No," Sirius said firmly, placing a hand on his arm. "Those energy signatures match the rendezvous coordinates for the Ventaxian fleet. My people chose this location deliberately. The chaos provides cover." Before Marcus could argue, Nox's gruff voice crackled over the comms. "Heads up, you two. We've got some serious quantum shearing going on out there. If we don't slow down, we might lose subspace coherency entirely." Marcus swore under his breath. "Copy that, Nox. Cutting thrust to minimal burn and engaging full particle shielding." The Hyperion's engines cycled down to a low thrum as layers of shimmering energy fields sprang to life around the hull. Slowly, cautiously, they edged deeper into the cosmic maelstrom. Reality itself seemed to fracture and reform around them. Vast galactic structures coalesced and imploded in the span of heartbeats. Geometries that defied comprehension flickered at the edges of perception, threatening to overwhelm the mind with their impossible complexity. A violent shudder ran through the ship as a tendril of corrosive energy lashed across their bow. Alarm klaxons blared as systems overloaded and failed. "Hnox," Marcus shouted into the comm. "Status report." "It's a bloody mess down here," the cyborg mercenary growled back. "Half our systems are fried, and the other half are about to go. We can't take much more of this." Suddenly, a garbled transmission cut through the interference. Sirius's eyes widened as she recognized the fragmented Ventaxian code. "It's them," she cried. "The expeditionary force, but these energies, we can't navigate directly to their position." Marcus's face hardened. "Then we'll have to get creative, upload our clearance codes. We need those tight beam coordinates." Working feverishly, they transmitted their encrypted identifiers through the narrow bandwidth still available. Seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as they waited for a response. Finally, a series of glowing glyphs materialized on the central holo display. "We've got it," Marcus exclaimed, already inputting the new heading. "Hold on to something. This is going to get rough." The Hyperion banked hard, diving deeper into the heart of the cosmic storm. Gravimetric forces shrieked against the hull as reality itself seemed to tear and mend around them. Marcus's world narrowed to the task at hand, every fiber of his being focused on following the tenuous lifeline of coordinates. With a final bone-jarring lurch, they burst through a curtain of writhing energy and into a pocket of relative calm. As the viewports cleared, Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Arrayed before them was the might of the Ventaxian expeditionary fleet. Massive warships hung suspended in the void, their sleek hulls scarred and pitted from untold cosmic battles. Their colossal dreadnought swung ponderously towards them, weapon systems flaring to life. Before Marcus could react, Sirius was already transmitting their authentication codes. "Unity Flame to Worldcarver Battle Group," she intoned, her voice ringing with authority. "Authentication Adamant Spire Fidelity. Scout Sirius Truelight reporting. We carry vital intelligence from the Whisper cults, requesting immediate rendezvous and triage support." As the channel closed, Marcus powered down non-essential systems. Acutely aware of the momentous nature of their arrival, they had reached the vanguard of a cosmic crusade, poised on the precipice of a war that would shake the very foundations of reality. Whatever horrors lay ahead, whatever nightmares they would face, Marcus knew one thing with unshakable certainty. He would stand with Sirius against the encroaching darkness, despite the toll. The acrid stench of ozone and burnt circuitry filled the cavernous hangar as Marcus and Sirius picked their way through the debris-strewn deck. Sparks rained down from ruptured power conduits, casting eerie shadows across the faces of shell-shocked Ventaxian crew members. Commander Gorvouts's towering form loomed before them, his ornate faceplate now cracked and scorched from the furious battle. With a hiss of hydraulics, he removed the damaged helmet, revealing piercing violet eyes set in a face etched with countless battles. "You have our gratitude, human," he rumbled, extending a massive four-fingered hand towards Marcus. "Your quick thinking may have saved us all from oblivion." Marcus grasped the alien warrior's forearm in a firm grip, feeling the latent strength beneath the commander's armor. "Just doing what needed to be done," he replied gruffly. "But we're not out of the woods yet. That thing was just a scout." Sirius stepped forward, her luminous eyes intense as she addressed Gorvouts. "Commander, we must convene the High Council immediately. The intelligence we've gathered from the whispered dead space changes everything." Gorvouts nodded gravely, gesturing for them to follow. As they made their way through the battle-scarred corridors of the World Carver, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at the alien architecture. Sweeping arches of living metal pulsed with bioluminescent energy, while holographic displays flickered and reformed in the air around them. They entered a vast chamber dominated by a circular table of shimmering crystal. As they approached, ghostly figures began to materialize around its circumference, the projected forms of the Ventaxian High Council joining from across the vastness of space. "Esteemed councillors," Sirius began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words, "the Whisper has grown far stronger than we ever imagined. They seek to tear down the very walls of reality itself." A chorus of concerned murmurs rippled through the assembled holograms. One wizened figure leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And what proof do you bring of these claims, young one?" Marcus stepped up, his cybernetic implants interfacing with the Worldcarver's systems. The air above the table shimmered as he projected the sensor data from their harrowing journey through the cosmic graveyard. "This is what we faced out there," he said, his voice grim, "and it's just the beginning. The Whisper is amassing forces on a scale we've never seen before." The council chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, each councillor trying to speak over the others. Gorvout slammed his armored fist on the table, silencing the din. "Enough!" he roared. "We cannot afford to bicker amongst ourselves. The enemy is at our doorstep, and we must act decisively." As the council debated strategy and mobilization plans, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to Sirius, seeing his own fears reflected in her alien eyes. "This is it, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "The war to end all wars." Sirius nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Luminants preserve us all, Marcus, for if we fail there will be nothing left to save." The weight of the coming storm settled over them as they stood amidst the swirling holograms, the fate of all reality hanging in the balance. The crusade against the encroaching darkness had begun, and there would be no turning back. The ancient Ventaxian priestess fixed Marcus with her piercing gaze, her withered hand hovering over the holographic display. The air crackled with tension as the assembled warriors leaned in, hanging on her every word. "Our gambit, emissary, is as audacious as it is necessary," she intoned, her voice a dry whisper that somehow carried throughout the war room. "We must strike at the heart of the Whisper's incursion, severing its tendrils before they can fully anchor in our reality." With a flick of her wrist, the hologram zoomed in on a pulsating nexus of energy, a writhing mass of impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. Marcus squinted, trying to make sense of the swirling chaos. "This is the primary incursion point," the priestess continued, her finger tracing the outlines of the anomaly. "A wound in the fabric of space-time through which the Whisper seeks to birth its monstrosities into our universe." Gorvout stepped forward, his armored bulk casting a shadow over the display. "And how do you propose we seal such a breach, Seer? Our most potent weapons barely scratch the surface of these abominations." The old female's eyes glittered with a fierce light. "We do not seal it, Commander, we weaponize it." A ripple of shock passed through the assembled Ventaxians. Marcus felt his stomach lurch as he began to grasp the implications of her words. "You're talking about using the breach as a conduit," he said slowly, his mind racing. "Turning their own gateway against them." The priestess nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Precisely, emissary. We will gather our fleet at the coordinates I have provided, concentrating the full might of our gravitic lances and reality-warping cannons on a single point." She manipulated the hologram, showing a simulation of energy beams converging on the anomaly. The resulting feedback loop should create a cascading implosion, collapsing the incursion point and dragging a significant portion of the Whisper's forces back into the void between realities. "Nothing," the priestess admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of countless eons. "But it will buy us precious time to fortify our defenses and rally our allies across the galaxy. It is a gamble, yes, but one we must take if we are to have any hope of survival." Sirius stepped forward, her luminous eyes blazing with drive. "The Ventaxian people stand ready to make this sacrifice, Seer. We will not falter in the face of oblivion." Marcus looked around the room, taking in the resolute faces of the alien warriors. He thought of the horrors they had witnessed, the unfathomable threat looming on the horizon. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "Count us in!" he growled, his hand instinctively moving to the grip of his plasma revolver. "The Hyperion and her crew will stand with you against this cosmic shitstorm." A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled Ventaxians. Gorvout clapped a massive hand on Marcus's shoulder, nearly buckling the human's knees. "You honor us with your courage, emissary," the alien commander rumbled. "Together we shall write a new chapter in the annals of our people, or perish in glorious defiance of the encroaching dark." As the war room erupted into a flurry of activity, Marcus caught Sirius's eye. The Ventaxian scout nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement of the madness they were about to undertake. "Knox," Marcus subvocalized into his comm. "Fire up the Hyperion's engines and prep all weapon systems. We're going void-diving into the mouth of hell itself." The World Carver's engines roared to life, propelling the massive vessel into the heart of the cosmic maelstrom. Marcus braced himself against the nearest bulkhead, as reality itself seemed to warp and twist around them. The view screens flickered with impossible geometries, each more maddening than the last. "Gorvouts, status on the fleet deployment," Marcus barked, his fingers tightening around his weapon's grip. The Ventaxian commander's voice cut through the cacophony of alarms and warning klaxons. "First wave is engaging the outer tendrils now. Fireboxes Alpha through Delta are primed and awaiting our signal." Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Countless friendly signatures blinked in and out of existence as the battle raged across multiple dimensions. The Whisper's forces writhed and pulsed, a cancerous mass devouring everything in its path. Sirius's hands danced across her control panel, coordinating the intricate web of strikes. "Phased wavefront assault initiating now!" The view screen erupted in a dazzling display of firepower. Lances of energy tore through the fabric of spacetime, each precisely aimed to fragment the Whisper's invasion force. Marcus watched in awe as entire star systems became kill zones, their very essence weaponized against the cosmic horror. "Knox, you reading this?" Marcus subvocalized into his comm. The cyborg's gravelly voice crackled back. "Reading it? I'm living it, boss. Hyperion's giving these void suckers a taste of good old-fashioned human ingenuity. You should see the fireworks from our angle." A violent shudder rocked the bridge as a tendril of pure entropy lashed out, narrowly missing the World Carver's hull. Marcus steadied himself, his enhanced reflexes kicking in as he analyzed the threat. "Gorvouts, we're taking heavy fire on the port side. Recommend—" The Ventaxian cut him off. "Belay that, emissary. We hold position. The interdiction spike must be deployed precisely now." At his command, a series of massive generators hummed to life. The air crackled with potential energy as weaponized singularities coalesced, their gravitational pull warping the very fabric of reality. Marcus felt his stomach lurch as spacetime itself seemed to stretch and contort. Through the view screen, he watched as the massed firepower of a dozen civilizations converged on a single point, the profane heart core of the Whisper itself. The universe held its breath for a moment that stretched into eternity. Then, with a silent scream that shook Marcus to his very core, the interdiction spike drove home. Reality fractured, a spiderweb of cracks spreading across the cosmic egg. The Whisper's invasion force splintered, its eldritch tendrils flailing wildly as they were drawn inexorably back into the yawning void. Marcus gritted his teeth, fighting against the overwhelming forces threatening to tear the ship apart. "Hold steady," he roared, his voice carrying over the din of twisting metal and shattering reality. "We finish this. We finish it now." As the universe itself seemed to unravel around them, Marcus Stevens stood defiant, a bastion of human will against the encroaching darkness. The battle for existence itself raged on, with no quarter given and none expected. The World Carver's bridge lay in ruins, a twisted mockery of its former glory. Sparks rained from shattered consoles as emergency klaxons wailed their discordant symphony. Marcus stumbled forward, his boots crunching on shards of fractured view screens. "Status report," he barked, wiping a streak of blood from his brow. "I need damage assessments now." Sirius hunched over a flickering terminal, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "Primary systems are offline. We've lost 40% of our hull integrity, and the quantum foam buffers are critically destabilized." A bone-deep shudder ran through the ship's superstructure, and Marcus felt his stomach lurch as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. He grabbed a twisted support strut to steady himself. The Ventaxian commander's towering form emerged from a cloud of acrid smoke, his battle-scarred armor scored with fresh plasma burns. Main batteries are depleted, and our ordnance stores are exhausted. We struck hard, emissary, but the cost was steep. Marcus nodded grimly, surveying the carnage around him. Crew members scrambled to extinguish fires and tend to the wounded. The air reeked of ozone and scorched circuitry. "Nox," he sub-vocalized into his comm, "give me a sit-rep on the Hyperion." Static crackled for a moment before the mercenary's gravelly voice cut through. "We're limping, boss. That last salvo damn near liquefied our port nacelles. Engines are running on fumes, and life support's sketchy at best." Marcus hardened his face, processing the grim reality of their situation. They had struck a mighty blow against the Whisper, but victory had exacted a terrible toll. "Sirius," he called out, "what's the status of the dimensional rift?" The Ventaxian scout's luminous eyes narrowed as she studied the sensor readouts. "The breach is sealing itself, but I'm detecting residual energy signatures. It's unstable." As if to punctuate her words, a violent tremor rocked the world carver. Ghostly tendrils of otherworldly energy writhed across the bridge, leaving afterimages burned into Marcus's retinas. "We need to pull back," Gorvots rumbled, his massive hand clamping down on Marcus's shoulder. "The fabric of reality is still raw here. If we linger too long, we risk being drawn into the collapsing vortex." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. "Agreed. Sirius, coordinate with the fleet. I want every ship capable of faster-than-light travel to initiate emergency jumps. We regroup at the fallback coordinates." As the crew sprang into action, Marcus felt the weight of command settle heavily upon him. They had won this battle, but the war against the cosmic horrors that threatened all of existence was nowhere near the end. He stared out into the void, where the last vestiges of the dimensional wound slowly knitted themselves closed, and steeled himself for the trials yet to come. The Hyperion shuddered violently as Marcus wrenched the controls, narrowly avoiding a tendril of writhing darkness that lashed out from the dimensional rift. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems strained under the onslaught of warped physics. "Shields at 30%, Sirius called out, her fingers flying across the flickering tactical display. "We can't take much more of this." Marcus gritted his teeth, his eyes fixed on the roiling chaos ahead. "We're not backing down now. Nox, redirect all non-essential power to forward shields." "Already on it, boss," the cyborg's gravelly voice crackled over the comm. "But I'm telling you, this tin can ain't built for transdimensional fisticuffs." A deafening screech of tearing metal reverberated through the hull as a glancing blow from a plasma lance scored their port side. Marcus cursed, wrestling with the controls to keep them on course behind Gorvots' flagship. "Sirius, status on those logic mines," he barked, sweat beading on his forehead as he executed a series of evasive maneuvers. The Ventaxian scout's luminous eyes flickered across her displays. "Detonation in 3, 2, 1. A silent shockwave rippled through space, distorting the very fabric of reality. Marcus watched in grim satisfaction as entire swaths of the enemy forces simply winked out of existence, their constituent particles scattered across multiple dimensions. "That's how we do it," he crowed, a fierce grin splitting his face. "Nox, light 'em up." The Hyperion's weapon systems roared to life, spewing forth a torrent of esoteric munitions. Microtemporal singularities bloomed in the void, their event horizons shredding anything caught in their grip. Mune disruption pucks sliced through the remaining hostiles with surgical precision, leaving twisted hulks of metal in their wake. As they pressed forward, the transdimensional rift loomed ever larger on their view screens. The laws of physics seemed to break down entirely as they approached, reality itself buckling under the strain of the Whisper's intrusion. "By the luminance," Sirius breathed, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of battle. "What manner of abomination is this?" Marcus didn't answer, his entire being focused on keeping them alive as they plunged deeper into the maelstrom. The Hyperion's hull groaned in protest as conflicting gravitational forces threatened to tear it apart. "Gorvouts, we're approaching critical structural integrity failure," he growled into the comm. "Tell me you've got a plan to seal this breach." The Ventaxian commander's voice came back, distorted and crackling with interference. "Stand ready, emissary. We strike at the heart of the beast." As if on cue, the massive Ventaxian flagship unleashed a barrage of firepower unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. Reality itself seemed to warp and twist as the concentrated assault tore into the dimensional wound. "Now, Marcus!" Sirius shouted, her hands flying across the weapons controls. "Hit it with everything we've got!" Without hesitation, Marcus triggered the Hyperion's remaining ordnance. A storm of munitions erupted from their launch tubes, each one specifically designed to disrupt and destabilize transdimensional incursions. The fabric of space-time convulsed as their combined assault struck home. For a moment, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a silent scream that reverberated through Marcus's very bones, the rift began to collapse in on itself. "It's working!" Sirius cried out, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "The breach is sealing!" But their victory was far from assured. As the dimensional wound began to knit itself closed, tendrils of pure entropy lashed out in a final, desperate assault. The Hyperion bucked wildly as one such tendril grazed their starboard side, alarms shrieking as systems failed across the board. "Hold on!" Marcus roared, pouring every ounce of his skill into keeping them aloft. "We're not done yet!" The Hyperion's hull groaned as it plunged deeper into the transdimensional maelstrom. Marcus's hands clenched the controls, fingers tightening beneath his gloves. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought against gravitational forces that threatened to tear the ship apart. "Sirius, reroute all auxiliary power to the inertial dampeners," he shouted over the cacophony of alarms. The Ventaxian scout's fingers danced across her console. "Done, but we're running on fumes, Marcus. One more hit and we're—" Her words cut off as a massive tendril lashed out, its surface writhing with impossible fractal patterns. It slammed into the Hyperion's portside, sending the ship into a wild spin. Marcus wrestled with the controls, gritting his teeth. "Not today, you cosmic bastard," he snarled. Sirius unleashed a barrage of turbo-laser fire, emerald beams slicing through the void. They struck the tendril, carving deep furrows into its otherworldly flesh. An ear-splitting shriek filled the bridge, forcing Sirius to clamp her hands over her auditory receptors. Marcus didn't flinch. He seized the moment, gunning the engines to full power. The Hyperion corkscrewed through the gap left by the severed tentacle, chunks of eldritch matter splattering across the viewports. They burst through into a realm beyond comprehension. All around them, reality itself convulsed and bled. Stars imploded and reformed in seconds, twisted geometries shifted and pulsed, their very existence an affront to sanity. At the heart of this nightmare, a colossal structure loomed. The whisper entity pulsated, its form a cancerous growth on the fabric of space-time. Ionized tendrils whipped out, seeking to ensnare the Hyperion. "Shields critical," Sirius cried out, her voice strained. "We can't take another hit." A bone-jarring impact rocked the ship. Marcus tasted blood but held firm to the controls. "Nox," he barked into the comm, "time to unleash hell." Static crackled. Then Nox's gravelly voice cut through. "With pleasure, boss. Let's make this cosmic horror regret ever slithering out of the void." The Hyperion's weapon banks hummed to life, glowing with eldritch energy. A storm of esoteric munitions erupted from the ship, streaking towards the whisper entity. Dimensional resonators tore into its form, ripping apart the very matrices of its existence. Marcus and Sirius fought on, their small ship a defiant spark against the overwhelming darkness. Debris pelted the hull as Ventaxian capital ships joined the fray, their combined firepower focusing on the abomination before them. Suddenly the entity convulsed. A roar that defied description shook the very foundations of reality. The Hyperion bucked wildly as space-time itself seemed to bleed and curdle around them. Then it appeared, a presence so vast, so utterly alien, that Marcus felt his mind recoil from the mere sight of it. Endless fractals and geometries beyond human comprehension coalesced into a form that dwarfed galaxies. Beside him, Sirius let out a strangled gasp. The pain of countless dying worlds echoed in her voice. As the true form of the Whisper manifested before them, Marcus felt a chill of primal terror seep into his bones. The Hyperion's shield sparked and failed under the entity's overwhelming presence. In that moment, as they stared into the face of cosmic annihilation, both Marcus and Sirius knew with crushing certainty that their real battle had only just begun. The Hyperion shuddered violently as Marcus wrenched the controls, his muscles straining against the overwhelming forces threatening to tear the ship apart. Alarms blared, their cacophony a deafening assault on his senses. The taste of copper flooded his mouth as he bit down on his tongue, fighting to maintain focus. "Sirius, status report!" he barked, his voice raw and strained. The Ventaxian's fingers flew across her console, purple eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "Hull integrity at 23%. Shields are completely offline." A bone-jarring impact rocked the ship, sending sparks cascading from ruptured conduits overhead. Marcus gritted his teeth, feeling the control yoke vibrate violently in his hands as he fought to keep them on course. Through the viewscreen, the true form of the Whisper entity loomed before them, a writhing mass of impossible geometries and fractal patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves endlessly. It defied comprehension, its very existence an affront to the laws of physics. "Marcus," Sirius whispered, her melodious voice barely audible over the ship's groaning hull. "This is beyond anything we've ever faced. It's the primal seed of existence itself." As if in response to her words, tendrils of pure entropy lashed out from the cosmic abomination. Where they touched, reality itself seemed to unravel. Marcus watched in horror as nearby Ventaxian warships simply winked out of existence, their matter scattered across dimensions. "Knox," Marcus shouted into the comm, "we need more power to the structural integrity fields." Static crackled, then the cyborg's gravelly voice cut through. "I'm giving her all she's got, boss, but we're getting pulled in. This bastard's going to tear us apart at the quantum level." Marcus felt it then, a creeping, insidious whisper at the edges of his consciousness. It spoke of futility, of the inevitability of entropy. For a moment, he felt his tenacity waver. Without thinking, he reached out and grasped Sirius's wrist. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. This was not the end. It could not be. "Not today," Marcus growled, his voice rising to a defiant roar. "Not while we still draw breath." With a surge of desperate strength, he yanked the controls hard to starboard. The Hyperion screamed in protest, but somehow, impossibly, it responded. They broke free of the entity's pull, streaking away from its grasping tendrils. "Nox!" Marcus shouted. "Hit it with everything we've got left." The Hyperion's remaining weapons roared to life, unleashing a barrage of esoteric munitions. They struck the Whisper entity, tearing brilliant wounds in its impossible form. For a moment, the cosmic horror seemed to recoil. As they hurtled away from the nightmarish scene, Marcus felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Sirius, her form radiant with an inner light that seemed to push back the encroaching void. In that final moment of awareness, a single thought echoed through Marcus's mind. They had struck a blow against oblivion itself, and though the war was nowhere near the end, hope still burned bright in the depths of space. The Hyperion drifted in the void, its hull a patchwork of scorch marks and twisted metal. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the bridge, illuminating the devastation. Marcus groaned, his head pounding as he pushed himself up from the cold deck plating. The acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled his nostrils. His eyes swept the ruined command center, taking in the sparking consoles and shattered viewscreens. Then he saw her, Sirius, crumpled and motionless beside the nav controls. "Scout!" The word tore from his throat as he scrambled across the debris-strewn floor. His heart hammered against his ribs until he detected the faint rise and fall of her chest. Gently, he gathered her lithe form in his arms. Marcus cupped her face, his armored thumb carefully wiping away a trickle of alien blood from her lips. "Not gonna happen," he growled, the words carrying the weight of an unbreakable vow. "That cosmic horror doesn't get to snuff out your light, not after everything we've been through." A bone-jarring impact reverberated through the Hyperion's hull. Marcus looked up to see massive umbilicals snaking out from Gorvouts's dreadnought, latching onto their battered ship. The Ventaxian commander's gruff voice crackled over the comm system. "Well struck, emissaries. You've bloodied the nose of that cursed entity and driven its spawn back across the veil, and for now." There was a pause, filled with the sound of distant explosions. "But I fear we've stirred up a nest of horrors our strategists never dared imagine." Gorvouts's laugh was a harsh, humorless sound. "The Whisper cult isn't just a localized threat anymore, emissary. Its tendrils have wormed their way through the very fabric of our reality." Marcus's tactical display flickered to life, showing a cascade of alarming data. Gravitational anomalies bloomed across vast swathes of space. Entire star clusters seemed to ripple and distort as interdimensional lesions tore open the cosmos. "Behold the true scope of the Ankri's infection," Gorvouts intoned. "Left unchecked, it will unravel the entire universe." Sirius stiffened in Marcus's arms, her fingers digging into his battle-scarred armor. "Then our path is clear," she said, her voice gaining strength despite the pain etched on her alien features. "We must hunt this contagion across every infected system and burn it out at the root, at any expense." Marcus helped Sirius to her feet, steadying her as she swayed. He looked into her eyes, seeing the reflection of reality fracturing around them in those luminous depths. All his previous doubts and prejudices seemed to evaporate in that moment. "You heard them, Scout," he rumbled, his voice carrying a newfound conviction. "We've got work to do. I need you with me, burning bright and defiant as we wade into this nightmare." Sirius met his gaze, a fierce dedication kindling in her eyes. "Ready the cadre for full oniric conflagration projection, emissary," she declared, her voice ringing with crystalline clarity. "We march into the trackless dark, carrying the flame of justice as our lodestar." As the battered Ventaxian fleet regrouped around them, Marcus knew they were about to plunge into horrors beyond imagining. But with Sirius at his side, her indomitable spirit resonating with his own, he felt ready to face whatever abominations awaited them in the twisted voids ahead. The Hyperion shuddered, its hull groaning under the strain of dimensional forces as it limped away from the shattered rift. Marcus's hands flew across the control panel, rerouting power and fighting to keep the ship on a stable trajectory. Warning klaxons blared, their shrill cries echoing through the corridors. In the medbay, the acrid stench of ozone and burned circuitry mingled with the metallic tang of alien blood. Sirius lay motionless on the regeneration pallet, her skin ashen and her luminous eyes flickering erratically. Indigo fluid seeped from her nose and ears, staining the pristine white of the medbay sheets. Nox hunched over a synthesizer, his mechadendrites whirring as they manipulated vials of iridescent liquids. "Hang in there, Scout," he muttered, not taking his eyes off his work. "We didn't come this far to lose you to some cosmic mind-fuck." The medtech beside him yelped as one of the monitoring devices sparked and smoked. "Sir, her quantum stability is critical. We're losing cohesion in her cellular structure." Nox snarled, slamming a vial into an injector. "Not on my watch." He pressed the device against Sirius's neck, the hiss of pressurized liquid barely audible over the ship's alarms. Sirius's body convulsed, her back arching off the pallet as she gasped in agony. Her eyes flew open, unseeing, as waves of distortion rippled across her form. "Fight it, damn it!" Nox roared, gripping her shoulders. "Don't you dare let that howling void take you." On the bridge, Marcus's eyes darted between navigational displays and the medbay readouts. Sirius's vital signs fluctuated wildly, each dip sending a spike of fear through his chest. He hit his fist on the comms panel. The Ventaxian commander's gruff voice crackled through the static. "Affirmative, emissary. Extending grapples." Marcus felt the ship lurch, as massive umbilicals snaked out from Gorvoutz's dreadnought, latching onto the Hyperion's battered hull. The sickening screech of metal on metal reverberated through the ship as the two vessels coupled. Atmosphere hissed through the newly formed seal, bringing with it the alien sense of the Ventaxian ship. Marcus barely waited for the pressure to equalize before he was out of his chair, racing towards the medbay. He burst through the doors to find organized chaos. Ventaxian medics swarmed around Sirius, their slender forms a blur of motion as they worked. Arcane devices pulsed with otherworldly energies, bathing the scout in shimmering fields of stabilizing radiation. One of the Ventaxian medics turned, its bioluminescent skin flickering in agitation. "We've initiated forced quantum inversion therapy," it reported, voice devoid of emotion. "Her localized real space persistence is stabilizing, but slowly." Marcus looked down at Sirius. Her eyes were open now, unfocused but present. He reached out, his battle-scarred gauntlet dwarfing her delicate hand. "How's my lodestar shining?" he asked, his gruff voice softening. Outside the viewport, the battered Ventaxian fleet regrouped, a phalanx of scarred warriors preparing for the next onslaught. As Sirius drifted into a healing trance, Marcus turned his gaze to the void, where fresh horrors of the Whisper's brood awaited. The primordial night wasn't done with them yet, but neither was the Herald of Liberty. "Knox," Marcus called, his voice low and dangerous. "Prep the weapons. We're not done making these cosmic bastards scream." The Hyperion's corridors thrummed with a low, ominous vibration as Marcus and Sirius made their way to the bridge. Each step sent ripples of pain through Sirius's battered form, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on, leaning heavily against Marcus's armored bulk. "Easy there, Scout," Marcus rumbled, his massive gauntlet supporting her delicate frame. "We'll get you patched up proper once we're through this mess." They reached the bridge, its atmosphere thick with tension. Holographic displays flickered and danced, painting the air with swirling star charts and tactical readouts. Nox hunched over a console, his mechadendrites a blur of motion as he worked. "About time you two lovebirds showed up," the grizzled mechanic grunted without looking up. "We've got fresh hell brewing on all fronts." Marcus eased Sirius into the nav chair, her luminous eyes scanning the displays with keen intensity, despite her weakened state. "Give me the sit rep," he barked, moving to stand at the helm. Gorvoutz's gravelly voice crackled over the comms. "Emissary, we've detected multiple incursions in nearby systems. The Whisper's influence is spreading faster than we can contain it." The main view screen flared to life, revealing a sea of stars marred by writhing tendrils of impossible geometries. Entire sectors pulsed with sickly light, reality itself buckling under the strain of the cosmic horror's assault. Sirius leaned forward, her slender fingers dancing across the nav controls. "I'm tracking quantum fluctuations consistent with the progenitor's energy signature," she reported, her voice strained but resolute. "If we can pinpoint the source, we might be able to strike at the heart of this infestation." Marcus nodded grimly, his hands tightening on the helm. "You heard the lady. Let's go poke this eldritch bastard right in its reality-warping eye." The Hyperion's engines roared to life, propelling the battered vessel forward. Around them the Ventaxian fleet moved in concert, a lethal dance of steel and fire against the encroaching void. As they plunged deeper into the corrupted space, the ship's systems began to fluctuate. Alarms blared, warning of dimensional instabilities and quantum resonance cascades. "Marcus," Sirius called out, her voice tight with urgency, "we're approaching a nexus point. The fabric of space-time is unraveling." Before them, reality itself seemed to tear open, revealing a maw of swirling, unknowable horrors. Tendrils of pure entropy lashed out, each touch threatening to unmake everything they'd fought to protect. Marcus snarled, his emerald eyes blazing with defiance. "Not on my watch," he growled, ramming the throttle forward. The Hyperion surged ahead, weapons blazing against the impossible geometries that sought to consume them. Sirius cried out, her form flickering as the ship plunged deeper into the maelstrom. Marcus reached out, his armored hand grasping hers, an anchor in the storm of unreality. Together, human and Ventaxian, they faced the howling void, their combined will a burning beacon against the encroaching night. The Hyperion pressed on, a spearhead of defiance thrust into the very heart of cosmic horror. The Hyperion's auxiliary medical bay erupted into chaos as Sirius's form twisted and contorted. Her slender body arched off the med table, limbs flailing wildly as waves of pulsing energy radiated outward. The air crackled with ozone, and the acrid stench of burning circuits filled the room. Gorvats's voice cut through the din, barking orders in his native tongue. Purple-skinned figures scrambled to secure equipment and erect containment fields. The ancient priestess stood motionless, her luminous eyes fixed on Sirius's writhing form. "The Avatar seeks dominion," she intoned, her wizened features etched with concern. "We must anchor her to this reality before she is lost to us." The priestess raised her three-fingered hands, intricate patterns of light dancing across her skin. "Through the sacred bonds forged in battle, chosen scion, your connection may yet prove her lifeline." Without hesitation, Marcus pushed forward. Each step was a battle against the howling vortex of power surrounding Sirius. Alarms blared as reality itself seemed to warp and bend around them. "Scout," Marcus called out, his voice raw with effort. "Remember who you are. Remember what we fight for." Sirius's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. Her voice, when it came, was a chorus of discordant whispers. "The pattern. It seeks to unmake, to rewrite." Marcus reached out, his gauntleted hand closing around Sirius's slender wrist. The contact sent a jolt of energy surging through his armor, overloading systems and searing flesh. He gritted his teeth against the pain, focusing on the alien features before him. "Stay with me, Sirius," he growled. "We've got more battles ahead. I need my lodestar." For a moment, the chaos intensified. Marcus felt as if he was being torn apart at the atomic level, every fiber of his being screaming in protest. Then, as suddenly as it began, the maelstrom subsided. Sirius collapsed back onto the med table, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. The oppressive energy dissipated, leaving behind the acrid smell of ozone and scorched metal. "Welcome back, Scout," he rumbled, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Gorvats approached, his purple skin ashen with fatigue. "The danger has passed for now," he said, his deep voice resonating through the suddenly quiet medbay. "But we cannot endure many more such assaults." The ancient priestess nodded solemnly, her luminous gaze sweeping across the battered crew. "The Avatar grows stronger with each incursion. We must act swiftly if we are to sever its connection to the physical realm." Marcus straightened, his lips pursed with grim purpose. "Then let's not waste any more time," he declared, looking from Sirius to the assembled Ventaxians. "We've got a whisper cult to silence and a universe to save." The medbay buzzed with renewed activity as the crew prepared for their next move against the cosmic horror that threatened to unravel reality itself. The medbay doors hissed shut, sealing off the nightmare within. Marcus stood alone in the sterile corridor, his armor pitted and smoking from the corrosive ichor. The ship's alarms blared, a cacophony that barely registered through the haze of shock and rage clouding his mind. He staggered forward, each step a battle against the crushing weight of loss. The corridor stretched before him, warping and twisting in his vision, as reality itself seemed to recoil from the abomination born in the medbay. "Emissary," Gorvats's gravelly voice crackled through the comm. "We've lost contact with the medical bay. What's your status?" Marcus's lips peeled back in a snarl, words failing him. He pounded his fist into the bulkhead, leaving a dent in the reinforced metal. The pain barely registered, a dull echo of the inferno raging in his chest. He reached the bridge, the doors sliding open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Ventaxian crew members worked frantically at their stations, purple skin slick with sweat as they fought to contain the spreading corruption. Nox looked up from his console, his mechadendrites twitching nervously. "Where's Sirius?" he asked, his gruff voice faltering as he took in Marcus's battered form. Marcus stalked to the main viewport, his emerald eyes fixed on the void beyond. When he spoke, his voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "Sirius is gone. The Whisper took her." A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the incessant wail of alarms. Marcus stood motionless, his massive frame silhouetted against the stars. The crew watched, frozen, as something fundamental shifted in their leader's bearing. Gone was the noble crusader, the beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. In his place stood something harder, colder, a vessel of pure, unrelenting vengeance. Marcus turned, his eyes burning with an unholy fire. "Set course for the heart of the Whisper's domain," he growled. "No more defensive actions, no more retreats. We end this now, or we die trying." The ancient priestess stepped forward, her luminous eyes wide with concern. "Emissary, the path you propose leads only to oblivion. We cannot hope to—" "Oblivion!" Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Oblivion is all that's left, and I'll carve our way through it, piece by bloody piece, until there's nothing left of the Whisper but cosmic dust." He strode to the helm, shouldering aside the Ventaxian pilot. His gauntleted hands gripped the controls, fist clenched beneath the armor. "Either stand with me," he snarled, addressing the stunned crew, "or get the hell off my ship." Without waiting for a response, Marcus punched in the coordinates. The Hyperion's engines roared to life, surging forward into the abyss. As they plunged deeper into the corrupted space, reality itself seemed to buckle and warp around them. Marcus's face was a mask of steadfast perseverance, his eyes fixed on the writhing void ahead. In that moment, he was no longer the herald of liberty, no longer the champion of a noble cause. He had become something else entirely, a force of nature, an avatar of retribution unleashed upon the cosmic horrors that had taken everything from him. The Hyperion carved its way through the twisted geometries of space, a spearhead of vengeance hurtling towards its final terrible confrontation with the Whisper, and in its wake, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.